Infrastructure, it seems to be probably one of the biggest common consensus now, so that we can probably even set up the International Development Alliance tackling this issue so that we can really avoid this geopolitical conflict.
We need to define a vision in which we both prosper, we both respect each other's ability to run our systems internally.
Welcome to CCG Global Dialogue. Our key guest today, Professor Laura Summers, and has been recognized as one of the world's most influential thinkers. So what do you see the world economy out of this, inflation in the US, and then, the World Bank actually lowered the forecast for all the economies?
I think we're likely to have significantly increasing interest rates if growth continues, if we want that growth not to translate into excessive inflation. And we're going to have to think about the consequences of all of that for some of the poorest countries in the world that have taken on very substantial debt, both because of the low interest rates and because of the challenges associated with COVID. So my hope would be that just as we did during the Asian financial crisis, and just as we did in 2008, there can be substantial cooperation between the United States and China in international financial policy, and especially in the issues facing debtor countries.
Infrastructure, it seems to be probably one of the biggest common consensus now, so that we can probably even set up International Development Alliance tackling this issue, have a joint project co-financing, so that we can really avoid this geopolitical conflict. What do you think about those things that we can do together?
International relations for thousands of years has been about balancing power in a stable way, and that continues to be very important. But it is also about achieving cooperation with respect to threats that endanger all. And I believe that that's why there needs to be a rethinking, a replenishing, and a renewing of the development banking system. And I believe that responsibility for that has to rest with the two great economic powers in the world. The most important investments that need to be made are investments in sustainability, in green infrastructure and architecture, and in global public goods. And it needs to be much more engaged in financing them, not just on its own, but with partners from the private sector, partners from national development banks. And it needs to pursue a common agenda of all nations and be a place where nations cooperate together.
So what do you think about the US-China relation, in the post-pandemic era, how we can really, get along and while managing the risk?
Henry, I've compared the US-China relationship to two individuals who have relatively little in common and who have substantial feelings of discomfort and distrust with respect to each other, who share a lifeboat with two oars in a turbulent sea a long way from the shore. And they may be right in their grievances with respect to each other. They may be right in their aspirations as to who should be in charge. But the reality is that unless they row relatively in unison for quite a long time, without the distractions of anger and conflict, they are not going to make it to the shore. And that is how I think the United States and China need to understand each other. If I had to use one word, I think the word I would use is co-opetition, to capture the idea that there's both going to be competition and there's going to need to be areas of cooperation. But I think ultimately we need to decide what it is that we want that is realistic to have. I don't think it is realistic for China to aspire to displace the United States as the world's leading economic power. I don't think it is realistic for China to aspire to a vision of the Asian continent in which the United States is not an active economic, political, and security participant. At the same time, I don't think it is realistic for the United States to aspire to the kind of unipolar hegemonic world that many in the United States talked about after the Berlin Wall fell. And so we need to define a vision in which we both prosper, we both respect each other's ability to run our systems internally. But I think that it is important that we start from a sense of what we ultimately want to achieve and go from there to a range of specific approaches, rather than, as is too often the case, a strategy is conflated with a wish list.
So, Professor Larry Summers, thank you again for your late evening and for your speaking to us. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.